But if we are getting a ruling into 2024 and we're 4 or 5 months ahead of an election, we then face potential meltdown in terms of the timing. And so certainly we hope we don't run into that territory.
The Electoral Amendment Bill is currently before the National Council of Provinces. It has passed the National Assembly in Parliament and will be continuing on its way through the legislative process. But what are the risks to South Africa's democracy? Well, joining me to discuss is Michael Atkins. He is an independent elections analyst. Mike Atkins, welcome back to the show.
Hi, David. Yes, obviously now it's going to go through the National Council of Provinces. I'm interested that they have called for public comment, which is, as far as I can see, optional at this stage. It seems like procedurally they're trying to make sure that there aren't grounds for complaint. And obviously, we would then expect now if it's approved in the National Council of Provinces, we would expect it to go to the president in early December for signing. It's not clear whether the president would manage this by the deadline of December the 10th, or whether they would seek a short extension on the deadline from the Constitutional Court.
Okay, and just by way of backstory, the Constitutional Court basically gave Parliament this deadline of December to amend the Electoral Act to include individuals on the ballot paper. But that raises all sorts of problems in terms of the constitutional requirements of proportionality. Could you explain that to our audience?
At the time that the minister chose the system that's currently embodied in the bill, they described it as a minimalist option, and they described it as simply slotting independents into the existing electoral system. However, there were unintended consequences of that, for the simple reason that individuals and proportional representation are effectively a contradiction in terms. So therefore, we have this problem that an individual who may gain multiple seats can only be awarded a single seat in any election. And now there have been various measures and changes as we've gone on to try and mitigate that problem. But essentially, it creates a numeric distortion. And one of the effects is that votes cast in favor of independent candidates are effectively partially allocated to the larger parties. So this then calls into question the right of individual voters to a fair election. It also calls into question as to whether the bill meets the constitutional requirements of an election being, in general, proportional representation. There's likely to be some debate and discussion around that particular point as how much latitude in general allows, but it is very clear that there are distortions to proportionality simply because there are these excess votes and seats that have to go somewhere, which automatically squeezes the numbers and breaks down the ordinary pattern of proportionality.
Okay, so say for argument's sake that for every seat in Parliament, there are about 40,000 votes cast for that seat. If an individual was, say, enormously popular, like a celebrity or somebody, and he or she got 400,000 votes, that would be the equivalent of 10 seats, but they can only sit in one seat. So the remainder
Correct.
would be discarded. So that basically violates the principle of representativity. And then where would those surplus seats go? Would those go to the larger parties?
Yes, they do go to the larger parties. And the thing is, if you think of it either as the excess votes or as the excess seats, they are distributed among the parties, but in a manner that is biased towards the larger parties. It isn't actually in proportion to the original votes obtained by all of the parties. Distribution of those seats or votes to parties, in my view, is inherently wrong because it means that parties gain a seat share in excess of their vote share. But even if one were to tolerate that disproportionality, the manner of distribution of those excess votes has a further bias which favors the largest parties. And this is inherent to the seat allocation mechanism that they've used to remove the excess seats. And there are no easy answers or quick fixes to that, because the original concept is actually a contradiction in terms.
All right, but now, Mike, as you've pointed out in a recent op-ed, the clock is ticking on the 2024 national elections. The IEC, the Electoral Commission, needs to prepare for those elections. They need to know what kind of system to implement. It seems like we're running out of time here on this discussion.
When the original court decision was made, the Home Affairs and the IEC had a very clear presentation about the timelines required to pass the legislation, and a constituency, a hybrid constituency PR system along the lines of our local government would have required drafting of the bill to commence in September 2020. It took more than a year before the bill was drafted, and by the time the minister was choosing which option to implement and to draft a bill from, it was already too late to be able to prepare constituencies for a new electoral system. This would have required changes to the demarcation board, and it would have required a demarcation process after the final legislation was completed. So by the time the minister was making the choice in October 2021, it was already too late. Therefore, he chose the only system that could be completed in terms of 2024 elections. And it seems that there are these unintended consequences of the distortions of proportionality. So we are literally now stuck. If the proportionality argument holds as a critique of the bill, then it won't be possible in terms of the current bill to have a free and fair election in 2024 under the terms of the bill. But not allowing independent candidates to stand has already been ruled unconstitutional. So it seems, with a growing clamour of opposition to the bill and a very widespread opposition among civil society bodies, it seems almost certain that there would be a constitutional challenge to the bill as soon as is possible, at which point the court is going to have to untangle how to conduct 2024. And we certainly hope that that decision, as difficult as it will take place during 2023, because the IEC will always be able to revert back to their existing systems as a worst case position. But if we are getting a ruling into 2024 and we're 4 or 5 months ahead of an election, we then face potential meltdown in terms of the timing. And so certainly we hope we don't run into that territory.
And could a direct application be made to the Constitutional Court for a reprieve there? I mean, could we see, if this impasse continues, that we won't be able to run the elections? Is that a scenario at all, or is that quite low probability?
It's low probability from where we stand now. In all likelihood, after the bill is signed, there will be an application for direct access to the Constitutional Court, so that we don't have to go through the laborious process of going through the High Court and then after that to the Constitutional Court. I presume that there would be an application for direct access to challenge the constitutionality of the bill fairly rapidly after the bill is signed into law. We hope that the court is able to prioritize this. It could involve quite difficult arguments, particularly as to what we do in terms of 2024. In my mind, it's fairly clear that the bill will be ruled unconstitutional in several respects of how seats are allocated. But how the court then decides how to conduct 2024 is an open question. And it could come down to a conflict of rights between independent candidates and the voters. Now, this is an awful dilemma to face, and I think we've learned at this point that we don't assume the way the court is going to rule. We've largely had very good rulings and rulings that have got us out of a few scrapes in the past. So it's going to be difficult, and hopefully we get to discuss those nitty-gritties as soon as possible during next year.
Michael Atkins, thank you very much. Let's hand over to you, our audience. What do you think is behind these proposed changes to our electoral system? Leave your thoughts down in the comments section. Also, if you enjoy this analysis, you might want to consider becoming a client of the CRA. There is a link in the description below where you can find out more information. My name is David Ansara. This is the CRA. Until next time, take care.